They stopped me like I was some common criminal, just because of a bike. But what they didn't know was that this small mistake was about to blow up into something far bigger than I ever imagined. My name is Marcus, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me, because this story is about how one wrong stop nearly turned into a nightmare, and how minutes later an army of soldiers showed up, 50 Humvees deep, led by a captain who changed everything. It was supposed to be just a quiet night ride home. Nothing fancy, just me and my bike under the stars. Then the flashing lights appeared behind me, and everything shifted. Suddenly, I was cuffed, accused of stealing a bike I'd owned for months. No chance to explain, no room for doubt, just suspicion and cold hands grabbing at me. But the real shock came moments later when rumbling engines and blinding headlights rolled down the street. Soldiers in full gear, powerful Humvees blocking the road. 50 of them, led by a captain whose presence demanded respect. What was going on? Why were they here? What I found out next blew my mind. My bike wasn't just a random vehicle. It was part of a stolen military convoy, a high-stakes chase involving dangerous criminals I never saw coming. Those officers had stopped the wrong person, and I was caught right in the middle. This is a story about mistaken identity, about being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but also about how courage, quick thinking, and a powerful military team turned a potentially deadly situation into a close call I'll never forget. So if you've ever been judged unfairly or felt trapped by circumstances beyond your control, this story is for you. Stay with me. The night air was thick with tension as I pedaled my old, battered motorcycle down the quiet streets of our small town. The headlights from my bike cut through the darkness, and the only sound was the faint hum of the engine and the rhythmic clicking of the chain. I was on my way home after a long day at work. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just me, the road, and the night. I'd barely made it a few blocks when flashing red and blue lights appeared behind me. My heart skipped a beat. The local cops were signaling for me to pull over. I slowed down, pulled off to the side, and shut off the engine. The street was deserted except for their patrol car. Two officers stepped out, their faces stern and serious. "License and registration," the taller one barked as he approached. I fumbled in my jacket pocket and handed over my documents, wondering what this was about. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't doing anything illegal. Still, their eyes were suspicious, scanning me up and down. "Do you know why we stopped, youve?" the second officer asked, his voice cold. Then, "No, officer, I haven't done anything wrong," I replied, trying to keep calm. They exchanged glances, then the taller cop pulled out a radio. "This guy's riding a bike that matches the description of a stolen vehicle reported just a few minutes ago. You're coming with us." My blood ran cold. Stolen vehicle? That wasn't my bike. I bought it from a friend months ago and had all the paperwork to prove it. "Officer, this bike isn't stolen. I can show you the papers. Please, you're making a mistake." But they weren't listening. One officer grabbed the handlebars, and before I could protest further, they forced me to dismount. The other officer cuffed my wrists tightly behind my back, ignoring my pleas. As they led me toward the patrol car, I couldn't help but notice how quickly things escalated. There was no room for explanation, no chance to clear up the misunderstanding. The officers were acting like I was dangerous, like I was someone to be feared. I glanced down the street, trying to see if anyone else was around. The houses were dark, curtains drawn, as if everyone was asleep or hiding. Suddenly, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Just then, the roar of engines broke the silence. It started softly like distant thunder, but quickly grew louder and closer. I turned my head and saw headlights approaching fast, dozens of them. My eyes widened in disbelief. 50 massive Humvees rolled down the street, their powerful engines echoing through the night. Soldiers in full combat gear sat rigidly in formation, faces grim and determined. Leading the convoy was a man in a captain's uniform, his sharp eyes locked on the scene unfolding before him. The cops stiffened, glancing nervously at the incoming military convoy. Their confidence seemed to waver for the first time. "Hold on," the captain barked through a loudspeaker, his voice commanding and clear. "Step back and stay where you are." The officers hesitated but complied, stepping back as the soldiers surrounded the area. The captain strode forward, his boots pounding on the pavement, and stopped directly in front of me. "Are you the one they stopped?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, sir," I replied cautiously. The captain studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, you're safe." I blinked, confused. "Safe? What's going on?" He motioned for one of his soldiers to step forward. "This man's bike matches the description of the stolen vehicle, but we know better. He's not the thief." Turning to the cops, the captain's tone hardened. "You stopped the wrong bike. This man is not your suspect." One of the officers tried to argue, but the captain cut him off. "Check your facts before making arrests. This is a serious mistake." Then the captain pulled me aside and lowered his voice. "I'm Captain Lewis, U.S. Army. That bike was reported stolen, yes, but it was stolen from a very specific military convoy transporting sensitive equipment. You're lucky we showed up when we did." My mind raced. Sensitive equipment? Military convoy? I don't understand. Captain Lewis nodded solemnly. "Earlier this evening, one of our supply trucks was ambushed on a remote road nearby. The thieves made off with some important gear, including that bike. We've been chasing them ever since." I shivered. "Why would someone steal a bike like mine?" "The bike was a cover," he said. "They used it to blend in, to move unnoticed in the area. We believe they were trying to get away under the radar." I swallowed hard, realizing how close I had come to being caught in the crossfire. "Had we not intercepted you when we did," Captain Lewis continued, "those thieves could have used your bike's identity to evade capture." I looked at the cops again, who now seemed embarrassed and a little ashamed. "Sorry for the trouble," the captain said to me. "We'll make sure this is cleared up immediately." The soldiers began to fan out into the neighborhood, searching every alley and street. The officers called for backup to handle the investigation properly. I was allowed to sit on the curb, free from the cuffs, as Captain Lewis briefed his men. From the looks on their faces, they were expecting a dangerous confrontation. Minutes passed and the tension in the air thickened. Suddenly, a soldier's shout pierced the quiet night. "Contact! Suspects spotted!" Without hesitation, the Humvees sprang into action, engines revving as they raced toward the commotion. I stood up, heart pounding as I watched the soldiers move with precision and urgency. Within moments, the streets were filled with flashing lights and the sound of barking orders. I realized this was no ordinary police matter. This was a military operation, and I had stumbled right into the middle of it. The captain returned after a few tense minutes, his expression grim but relieved. "We've apprehended the suspects. They won't be causing any more trouble." I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Thank God. He looked at me and smiled briefly. "You're safe now. Sorry about the rough start." I managed a weak smile. "I guess I'm lucky the Army showed up instead of just the cops." Captain Lewis laughed softly. "Sometimes it takes a little more muscle to get the job done." He turned to the officers who were still hovering awkwardly nearby. "I suggest you learn from this. Mistakes like this can cost lives." The cops nodded, humbled. As the soldiers loaded the suspects into the Humvees, I thought about how different my night could have been. If the thieves had managed to use my bike's identity, if the cops had been less careful or less lucky, I might have been dragged into a nightmare. The captain came back over, extending his hand. "If you want, we can arrange for you to get your bike back officially, with all the proper paperwork." I shook his hand gratefully. "Thank you, I appreciate that." As the military convoy started to pull away, I stood in the street, watching their taillights disappear into the distance. The night was quiet again, but something inside me had shifted. What started as a frightening misunderstanding ended with me realizing just how fragile safety can be, and how fortunate I was to have people like Captain Lewis and his soldiers watching over us. I took a deep breath, revved my bike, and headed home, feeling a little safer, a little stronger, and forever changed by the night the cops stopped the wrong bike and the Army showed up.